Welcome everybody to this presentation or maybe more workshop. I'm Sam, as you already know, and this is my personal website. Very convenient if you have like a complicated last name like that. I'm from Basic Software Development. We sponsor the coffee. And just a few words about what we do. Our core vision is to help nonprofits to be more efficient in their digital workflows, especially back-end applications, back-end management tools, but also publishing. Yeah, that's what we do. We also do a few other things. We have a big project with Tong. Is he here? Yeah, not here. Yeah? Okay. And or a code reviewing project which we have going on right now. So, but our core vision is to support mission and Christian ministries. Yeah, what else? Oh, yeah, that's okay. Helping people with administrative tasks. That's what we want to achieve. Now, what is this talk about? So, as you might have guessed from the title, from Excel to web-based database, there's something about databases going on, but I don't want to bash on Excel or something. I think it's like spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are very good tools to help in your digital daily work, especially the Microsoft Office suite is very nice for for your personal data, your Words and your Excel, PowerPoints, and also with their online integration. It's very nice to work with, but sometimes people use it or overuse some parts of it. And I think, for example, if you talk about spreadsheets, about Excel, the big advantage is that it's so easy to use. But sometimes it's like too easy, and what happens is that like I start to share my Excels over the whole organizations because like I have this cool address book of all our volunteers or something, and then we start mailing things forth and back, and there are like also companies which really struggle with this. Companies who have their whole inventory and their products in Excel sheets. We're not talking about like web-focused companies, more traditional companies, but so this problem exists, and they also exist in mission organizations, and that's one of the things that we want to help to relieve a bit, to improve a bit. Yeah, so our approach is basically, or my approach is basically, use the right tool for the right work. So as I said, Excel might be a very good tool for your personal things, but sometimes it comes to pass that you should use another tool. And one of these tools might be a web-based database which improves your efficiency. But I want to go quickly a bit into how do you decide when you should use such a web-based database application, or like, and let's say any multi-user database application at all, because I think it's important to make the right distinctions there. So one of the first things is if you share your data with quite some people, let's say more than just your desk neighbor, then start to think about using a real database. I know there's like Google Docs which allows concurrent editing, but that's more on like collaborative content creation and not about sharing data. So yeah, as soon as you find yourself mailing an Excel more than 1 or 2 times around, then think about why do we send information like that.
The newer versions.
Sorry?
The newest versions, particularly if you've got Office 365 and Excel 2016 or 19, do allow you multiple people to edit simultaneously.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. But as I said, that's more about collaborative accessing the database, and it's not about sharing from like. Okay, well, we can go a long route then there because it's okay. But yeah, I know these features exist, but I think they target like a quite a different purpose than a multi-user access to a database. So yeah, that's it. Also, I mean, we have also Google Sheets and the whole Google Office suite, so you can use that too, of course. So the points here are just like start to think about using a database. There's not like oh we need to share it, so we need to use a database. The next one, you need to protect your data. One thing, of course, is if you don't want to rely on cloud hosting from Google or from Microsoft, but in particular, if parts of your Excel should not be editable by other people, or parts of your data should not be editable, or even viewable by other people, or readable by other people. That's especially if the organization grows a bit, that becomes pretty quick an issue. Or if people work in CAN or RAN countries, then that also will be very quick an issue. Even though it's likely not an issue if you just plan a short mission trip with a few volunteers. So again, there you have to think how exactly will the impact be. But protecting your data, that's what a database is designed for. That's why we use these tools. And the next one, which I think is one of the one that I see most handled wrong, is as soon as your data gets operational or mission critical, you should really not put it in an Excel file. So we have things like Locky and these kind of ransomware that lock your disk files, which Christopher talked shortly about. So if these things encrypt your Excel file, then you're stuck, and your mission trip to, I don't know, Nigeria or something won't happen, I guess. Or you might have some problem to gather all the emails again. But there's also people, like small organizations, that start growing and put bookkeeping in Excel, and these files can get corrupted, they can get deleted. And I think Christopher asked how many of you do backups regularly, and I didn't see, was it a lot, or do most of you backup your hard disk? You do? Right, so that's good, but not all office workers do, and I don't see basically the Excel files regularly backup. So that's an issue too. As soon as you need to rely on these kind of data, because even if it's like even a database does not mean that your data is backed up, but the chance is much more likely because you have an operating system administrator or something. Yeah, so this is like three use cases or points where you should start thinking about, should I put this data in a database, or should I like talk with somebody? So, and I think it especially concerns small organizations or organizations which grew quite a bit in the past. But even larger organizations, they sometimes still rely too much on unreliable storage systems. Let's call it that way. So today I'm going to talk a bit about the web-based database system, which is called Django. And I want to talk quickly why I will introduce you to this and why I like to use it. It is a widely used system. I think now it just turned like 15 years old or something like that. So there's a lot of history and industry wisdom, especially security, integrated there. So Django is Django is open source. That's the first one, which is nice for a lot of people, and it's free, which is also nice if you are a ministry-based organization, because we always worry about budget. The next thing is the documentation, because if you start doing something in your organization, or if another company sets you up a database, documentation of the system is something that's very helpful. If you want, especially if you're like a super user and you set something up yourself, you can get very far with Django because it has a very extensive and very good organized and structured database documentation. So the next thing is what I like, or why I recommend Django, is that it's providing all the difficult things in developing such a system in easy, reusable blocks or reusable packages. For example, like password management, on password checking, session handling of HTTP sessions, database access, data import-export. All these things, they come as very easy pluggable components, which makes it very nice, and leads also to the third point, which means it's to a very large part application agnostic. So it only assumes you have a database and you have a web app. So it doesn't care too much. Do you use a Postgres database or do you use a NoSQL database? Do you use like Vue.js or any of the other most newest JavaScript frameworks for the front end, or are you just using pure HTML? That's all up to you. So that's especially for developers interesting, but also for system administration, that you're very back-end and front-end agnostic. Okay, so I want to speak quickly about the core components of Django. There's like 3 core components, which all the rest of it are built on. The first one is the ORM, which basically just means mapping a database into code. If you're a developer, you might have encountered this already. If not, it's basically just a way to describe SQL in programming code and adding checks and making access to the database easier. That's the first part. And this is about data modeling, this is the core part of Django and basically of any database application, making it easy to model your data. Next thing is routing. This is a rather small part, but also important for a web-based database. The Django routing does basically translate your URL into a function call inside your application. So this is not how it really works, the Google thing, but conceptually it's pretty on that level. Let's translate your string, URL string, into a piece of program code. And the third one is the presentation layer, or the views, how it is called in Django, which is just putting out some HTML, or it could actually be anything. It can be JSON, it can be HTML, it can even be an Excel document for download if you like that, as long as it's print or returned over HTTP, over a web browser. So if these 3 parts, data modeling, which is what interests us, what is interesting for us to model our workflows and how we save data. We have the routing, which makes things accessible here. The routing which makes things accessible over HTTP. And last thing, we have the nice thing, the HTML rendering forms and pictures and everything that's inside the database in a nice way. Okay. So actually, I was actually not expecting that I will be like having this track alone. So I was expecting a few like more of a more development interested group here, and we are going to do some hands-on task now, which means I will show you how to create a simple database application live on my notebook. But I think even if you're not like into programming at all, it's still valuable for you, because we will mostly do configuration, or it's not configuration, it's declaration of the data model, which is very similar to editing config files, or if you ever edited the registry, that's not too far from what we're doing. And the other thing is, like, even if you're not a developer, you might now get an impression where you can start, and next time you see maybe an Excel sheet that you think, oh, actually we should use a real database for that, you can recommend it to your IT staff or your super user. Or maybe you're interested to getting started with it yourself. So, okay. So as I said, if you want to, in case you want to follow, you should have Python 3 installed on your machine. That's pretty all that we need to get started. Normally I work on Linux, but I sacrificed that comfort for using Windows and just a command prompt and Notepad++ to show you that it can get started very quickly from your current environment, whatever that might be. So that is to say, that's not how we normally develop a full-blown productive application. But if you start with this, then you have a very direct path to a full-blown, full-featured database application. Okay, we'll get started with pip. Pip comes with your Python installation, and what we first do is we install Django. And I installed it before already, so it will just be installed from cache. What the Django installation will do, it will just provide you with basically the Django admin command. And we can now just type start project in order to get like a project skeleton set up. So, and we will call this ICCM demo. Okay. And now you see there's a new directory created in my home directory here on Windows. I'll quickly go into that. And you see there's two things. There's the manage.py file, which is the basic management script, which we will use for all future interaction with the project. And there's like a settings directory called same name as the project name. And here we have a few files. They're basically, most of them are not interesting to you. The most interesting will be settings.py, where you can do quite a few of low-level configuration. And the only thing that you need to know to get started is that you will need to add your custom models and your custom parts in this list of installed apps. And I will show you in a moment how to do that. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do to get our database running is we type Python and I first need to switch to that directory. Okay. So we want to get our database up and running, and in order to do that, we need to initialize the database, which we do by calling this command Python manage.type migrate, which basically creates our database if it does not exist yet. And so you see there's like a few things going on the screen. The database is created, and we see here, if you go back to our folder, there is now an SQLite database created. SQLite is something that you can use in production definitely, but it depends heavily on your load. If you think SQLite is not the right tool to be a database, then you should go and check out the documentation, because it's a very well done transactional database, which can even be used on a web server under up to a certain load. Okay. Having that said, now to get our application really running, like our web server, we need to run this command Python manage.py run server, and we'll have a local test server running, which we can access through localhost port 80. And this is just a default template, which you will see when you have debug mode enabled, but that's not interesting for us. There's an admin backend, which is where we want to do our stuff, our things for right now, but we don't have an admin user right now. So we need to cancel the server and first create an admin user. And this is one of the points where you see that Django tries to bring in experience of the last 15 years, also especially regarding security. There's no default user. There will be a warning about our password, because I will choose admin, which you should never do, obviously. And so what I do that is he warns me even on the command line that this is a very weak password and I need to confirm with yes, I want to do this. And if you're doing this on the front end, it will not work because on the front end you just cannot override the password policies. You can change the password policies, of course, but that's for another session maybe. Now we run the server again. Run server. Okay. And so we log in with our newly created super user. That's right. Admin. Okay. And see, by default, Django just comes without any models or things in the database except groups and users. And in the users, we right now just have the admin user. So, okay. So now this was all like the boring stuff basically, just to get something up and running. What I should mention here, maybe what you see here is the Django admin backend, and this is like an addition to the Django framework, which comes with the default package. And like if you do like often in general, if you do a real application, we will not use this one, but we will use it today because if we use this Django backend administration, we don't need to write our own HTML code. Normally, you would start from scratch, more or less, or with some HTML templates to get your application up and running. So, having that said, we will now create our first, or our model, basically. Oh, before we go to that, what I want to show you is our use case, our actual use case, what you're going to do. So we are maintaining this list of volunteers. It's grown pretty large now. There's like 1,000 volunteers that we have handled since we started our organization, imaginary organization. So we track their names, last names, their emails, their gender, and which phase they are in their volunteering process. So we have like a few phases here, like registration, preparation, on-field anti-briefing, and an empty one if you want to do that. Okay. So and this is pretty nicely set up, the whole Excel. So the person who did this was very like to use Excel and did everything nicely and well done. Yeah, and this is what we want to put into a web-based database because in the future we may want to extend this whole process and get better reports and stuff like that. Also allow other users to access things based on the current phase and things like that. We will not going to implement all of this today, but just to give you an idea why we would do this. So back to the command line, we will start a new app. An app is, before we saw these Lego bricks, right? And like in Django world, such a Lego brick which contributes functionality to your database is called an app or an application. So we will start now an app and call this app volunteer because we want to handle or manage our volunteers in the database. Okay, so go back here and you see we have a new folder called volunteer, which is now our Lego brick for this database, which will handle the volunteers. There is a set of default files which are created and they're basically all empty. We will not use most of them, so today we will not use the views because that's for creating your custom HTML front end. We will not use the tests, even though we should normally. We will not use the apps because that's only for more advanced configuration of your application. What we'll be using is the models because that's how we structure our database and which is the interesting thing for every workflow or data modeling process. And we use the admin, which allows easy integration in this admin backend I showed you before. Okay, so we'll start with the models. How do we define a model in Django? That's pretty straightforward. In that we define a class. We declare a class and call it volunteer because that's what we want to model. We want to have a model volunteer in our database. and we need to inherit from the Django default model to hook it into the database. Now, here we will just define our fields that we want to use, and this often translates more or less directly to the Excel columns that you're using. And you see here this syntax. In case you know SQL, the whole thing is very closely linked to SQL. Even though Django supports non-SQL databases, a lot of it is assuming that you are using SQL database. Okay. Oh, sorry. First loss is wrong. I should not talk and write at the same time, but you know, there's not that much time. Okay. And we want to have the last name as well. So you see, if you know SQL, there's like in general, you have some kind of varchar column type, which requires you to put in the maximum numbers you can put in that column, and that's what is reflected here in the model. So we have email, and when you use email addresses, you often want to like have some validation when people enter email addresses that there's an @ and a few other things. So Django also comes with an email field out of the box, which is because it's so often used. Next one would be gender, and we could do this with two different types. We can use Boolean, which is just 0 or 1, but we will use a char field now because that's just easier to handle. And I'll show you in a moment why. Because in the front end, we will want to display a text or not just 0 and 1. Right? And what we can do, if we have something like this, we can just define options on a certain field, so the user will only be able to select certain values. So here we have male, or actually because we have such a high male-female ratio in this conference, I think we should put females first. Female, and then we have male. Okay. So now through these option things, the whole text field will basically become a drop box, and only a certain set of options is allowed to be selected. These options can also be generated more dynamically, but that's not for now. Okay. And then the last thing, like the interesting thing, is the face actually. And again, here we'll see that this is heavily leans onto SQL, which I find a good thing, because in the end your data model needs to be reflected in SQL if you want to use a transactional database, which is what you should use normally. And Django does not try to hide that. So we'll put here in something. Okay. Now what we will use here is a separate model for the faces. We could use like a char field here too, and limit the options the user can select. But to demonstrate the relational aspects of the system, I will add a separate model for a face. Because maybe we want to add some description to what a face exactly is, or models, sorry. Okay, and here we'll only have one field, which is the name. Models.char field. Okay. Okay, and your max line. And then we can now reference the face, the model we just created here, and that's something like so. This is something you do very often. If you save any data in a relational database, relations are the big things, the things that you need to think very through how you want to structure them, and I think Django helps to make this easy. So, and here we need to specify one parameter. What happens if the target face is deleted by an administrator or something, which is something that's pretty important. If you ever have worked on a production database, if people start to delete like entries that are used in other places, other records, then your database can get messed up very quickly. And in Excel, you basically have no way to prevent that, or just very sophisticated kind of formulas. So we'll just set this one to null, meaning empty in database terms, and we need to allow this field to be empty. By default, Django does not allow database fields to be empty, which might seem weird if you're not used to data modeling, but as soon as you have some experience with programming and with modeling data, we'll see that empty fields are often a source of problem, because if you're programming something and using data, you're generally assuming that data is initialized. You don't want to check every time, is there a value or not? So we have to explicitly mark that we can have an empty value for this field, for the face field. We could not allow it, or we could allow it. That's up to us. That's data modeling. Yeah. Okay, so that's our data model. How we wanted to be in the database, basically. And it pretty closely reflects what we have in the Excel. So what you need to do now we need to do two things to activate this new part, this new Lego brick, so to say. We needed to add it to the installed apps, and just type the name in here, which is volunteer. Okay. So Django will recognize this now as a Lego brick and do all the checks that Django does on this part. And we need to run two commands, which are make migrations. And this is seems like if you're just doing a hobby project, seems to be like overused. But as soon as you have an existing database and want to change your data model, which will basically always happen on a real-world project, this command basically looks what is in your database and what is the difference to the model you defined in the code, and it will generate files to change the database to match what you have in your code, which is very handy if you have different. Like if you have a testing server where you do tests on a model, and you have a production server, and on production you don't do updates that often, but on the testing server you update your things regularly. So you can keep different versions of your model, and you can change them incrementally, which is very helpful. So we have here a typo, I guess. This is not options but choices. Sorry for that. And okay, so we see one of the things he's done. He's added a so-called migration file, and this file will, as soon as we run migrations, it will create the according database tables, or make the changes or whatever we did. So in our case, we just created a new model, so it will be added to the database as soon as we run migrate. So this might. Okay, the whole story about the data migration might seem a bit over for a weekend project, but as soon as you plan to take it a bit further and have more than one deployment, you will really appreciate that. So we run migrate, and this data model will now be active in our database. We will not see anything change in the web interface at this point, because in order to be enabled in the backend, we need to add it into our admin file, which is here. Here we need to add another class, and we call this just face admin. It's very similar to what we do in the model definition, but here we don't need to do. Pass. We don't really need to do anything. We just need to declare that we want to use this model we just created before in in the admin backend. So we come here, face and face admin, and we need to import this, which is a Python thing, from models, import face and volunteer. So we can use these data models we created before, we can use them in the admin backend. We can import here. So what we did now is enabled the face class to be handled in the admin backend. Okay, so we'll run server and hope there's no typo, and that seems to be okay. And go to the backend, reload, and now we see there is our volunteer app, and we have the faces, and we could click on that and see there's nothing right now here. Let's quickly add the faces. So we have registration. Oops. We have, what do we have? Preparation. So that's how the same faces that are defined in the Excel. So now you see this is a little bit a weird name for what you just created, but we will get to that in a moment. Then we have on field. Oh, and we have debriefing. Okay. So we've got the faces, but they don't look very helpful in our table. In order for them to appear a little bit nicer, we need to define how they should be displayed, and here you can start seeing what we mean when we say it's application agnostic, because I can basically define the object to be displayed in any way. For now, I will just return the name. Oh, sorry, this is way too much code. Okay, just the name of the face will be returned to display it as a string. By default, Django will try to render an object as a string. So that's how this works. Okay. So now here we got it, all our faces and their names. Okay. Okay. Actually, we should do the same thing for the volunteers. So we will display them, and here we use a little Python string operation trick, which is a formatted string, so we can just use in-place variables. And we will use first the last name, comma, and then self dot first name. Okay, so but we could adjust this function, this return value, to anything we would like to be displayed in the front end. And another thing we need to do is to add here the volunteer also into the admin backend. Okay. Volunteer. Okay. And also register it in the backend. Volunteer. And
it's following pretty well until about 5 minutes ago. Now
oh, really? Yeah. Why did I lose you?
We just keep throwing these commands in here that don't make any sense to me.
Okay.
But you don't have to go back and
I know.
explain. You just.
So did you? But I think most of you could follow until the model definitions, I guess.
I was all right with the class phase and volunteer.
Okay. So maybe a short word about string. This is like a Python internal thing to render objects, Python object as a string. You can put in here anything. We could return just hello, and every phase would have the name hello. This is just for pretty printing, basically, if you print out the object on the website. Okay. And this def is in Python is used to define a function. Okay. If you don't know what a function is, I'm not going to explain it right now because that would go too far. And here we see okay, there's a lot of code to declare using our models in the admin backend. But we will see these two classes. They're basically just necessary if you want to customize how these things are displayed in the backend. Right now we just use path, which means just use the default and just register the class to be displayed in the admin backend. But we will, in a moment, customize the display for volunteer admin to get some nice features out of the box. Like, people will say, in Excel I can sort, why can't I sort here? And things like that. Okay. So we'll go now back to volunteer, and now here we have our volunteers, and I can add a volunteer, which would be Samuel von.
Should you import that file rather than add them?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
I mean,
That's yeah, I had to make that decision, and we will do it, but
I understand the length of what you're trying to do.
Okay, so I got my name here. Before we go to the import, I think this table is not very helpful right now because there's only the name. There's only what I defined in this one function down here in the string function for volunteers. So there's only last name, first name. So what we can do here is say list display, and there's all these options are very thoroughly documented and very easy to read. So in case you want to do that yourself, no problem. So we'll add here the names of the fields of the volunteer we want to display. I think we can display gender too, maybe email, and the face. Okay, something like that. Okay. So now, if you go back, reload it, we got all these things here. We can now, it doesn't sort obviously, but we could also sort by these different columns. Another thing that I quickly want to add before we go to the import is filtering and search. What you very often will now in our case we would like to filter by face, current face somebody is in. So we add list filter and put in their face. I think it's list filter. I hope. Yeah. Okay, list filter. And we can define, like we can add a search bar and define which fields should be searched, which is also a very handy thing that we use quite often. So we want to be able to search for last name and first name and maybe email. Okay, let's go here, and we got a few things added now. We can filter by face, which will later be important when you import 1,000 contacts, and we can search for names and email addresses. Okay. Now, import. Okay, import is not an easy thing. If you ever done a data migration, a migration of a database, or an import of an Excel file, it's something that's not straightforward. So I was a bit hesitant to demonstrate it here. But just for March, we will do it now. Today.
You don't have to do that for me.
I prepared it already. So.
Alright.
Okay. We need to install another Django package. So there's like a few thousands of them, which provide additional functionality. And a few of these packages are done not well, and a few of them are done very well. So that requires some research. For import and exporting data, there is a pretty standard one, which is heavily used, and it's called Django Import Export. And we just install it by using pip. Django. Oh, sorry, that would be import export. And again, I installed it already, so it's taken from the cache. And this also is a new type of Lego brick in our application, so we needed to add it in our application, and it's just import, export. It's a little confusing that there are different names for installing it and enabling it, but there's packaging reasons how the repository works. Okay, now we can start our server again. But what we need to add what we need to define in order to activate import-export, we need to enable it for every data model we have. So basically for every Excel sheet we use. So what we need to add here is again a class, because this is all classes, but these classes all do just like declare what fields are there and what fields we use and things like that. So we will now add a class and call that thing, let's say, volunteer from Excel or something, or just volunteer Excel. And we need to we import another tool from import, export, import resources, and another one, import, export. There's a lot of import words here. Import, export, mixing. Import, export, mixing. The mixing we will use to enable the import, export tool also in the admin backend. Some of these Lego bricks, they come with an admin backend integration. A lot of these Django apps or Lego stones we use directly in the code, but some of them provide us with an admin integration, and this one does, so we will use that to no need to write our custom code to use it. Sources. So we add a new class definition to define which fields we want to import or export. Model resource. And here we have a little bit of a different way to declare which class this is related to. So we add here model equals volunteer. Volunteer. Okay. So we now define like an Excel resource, or just like a general resource, import export resource connected to the model volunteer. And I think we want to specify the fields, which fields we're going to import or export. And that will be last name. I think we could also let it do it automatically, but sometimes we do not want to import all fields, or want to import only a certain set of fields. So that's why we will list here these things as an example. And okay. So that again is
They have to be in the exact order?
no, okay, I didn't try out. I think it doesn't matter. I think it will just match. Sorry, okay. If you want to go down the rabbit hole, there is like a lot of options how you can figure how to map an Excel column into a database column and how to find the right column. By default, it will just take the first one and look, okay, is there an Excel column with this name on top of it? And then the second, is there a column with this name, and so forth. Which requires us to change our Excel files a little bit, but that's common if you make a data import. So we will add a few things to the Excel in order to make an easy import. But you could also make a very extensive class here and do like trying to get automatically what to load into which column. And then in order to display the import at the right admin backend in the right place, we need to define here what is the resource class. Here Excel, I think. Yeah, okay. So this we need to do to hook this import export definition to the volunteer admin. Okay. So that's it, and with that we should have, if we didn't make a lot of typos, I think we did. Import export mixing. Okay, sorry. We need to add admin here because part of the admin, and actually we need to add this one down here too. Okay, so this is the basic configuration to enable the import-export functionality, and we'll go and check here. And we have here now two new buttons, which is import and export. Now we can do the import directly, but if you use the original file I displayed here, it will not work out of the box because, as I said, the column title need to match. You can add your own matching code to match first name and last name and things, but in general, you anyway want to have a little bit more of a prepared import file. So I did that already, so we don't need to go through that again. The import will require an ID. This is just to prevent overriding data which you didn't intend to, and also in order to allow updates. So like if you're importing data from your accounting application or something like that, you can rely on these IDs to just update entries or add new entries. But that's just auto-generated in Excel for now, because that's like clean import, clean slate, so we don't care too much about where the ID starts. We changed the column titles to match the according fields in the database. And one thing we had to do is, the problem is, as soon as we have relational data, as we have with the face, we need to do the lookup either in the Excel or in the import code. The easier one for us now was to do that in the Excel file. So I just assigned a number to every phase. You can see that here. So registration would be 1, and preparation 2, and on field 3, debriefing 4, which are the database IDs of the phases we already created in the database, and then here making the according columns. I created the column just by using a VLOOKUP, so if you are anyway used to Excel, these things of operations shouldn't be too foreign concepts to you. But you could also just do a search and replace and let that do the work for you. So that's a little bit an updated, prepared Excel file.
Will that load with the blanks on the phase names?
With the blanks where?
On the phase names.
Yeah, that's the reason why we defined in our model that we can set null on a phase.
Oh, okay.
But actually, if you're working on the web interface, it will not allow you to set the phase to nothing, because there's one thing is the front end, and one thing is the back end. So in the back end, we allow null values, but in the front end, we say, okay, normally you should not enter that. So we restrict it, but we allow it to be in the database. And with that, we allow it to be in the database. So what we do now is import, and we can browse to a file, this one. And if things are wrong, or like not everything is completely clear, then Django will let you know. You have to make very clear what maps to what in order to prevent data loss and things like, oh, yeah, look at that. What did I do? That worked last time. Sorry?
Will this append it to your current database table, because you already have a single record in there?
Yeah, that was what I'm going to show you. No. Oh, okay, yeah, no. I think I have to add the ID here too, if I'm not completely wrong. Here. I think I should just have left this empty in order to just import all fields, but okay, it seems to work because it takes so long. So what you see here now, the thing you mentioned, Rick, is that the first record which I created is now replaced because the ID here is 1. If I would like to prevent it, I would just set the ID in the Excel to the last entry. But with this mechanism, you are also able to update data from an external source.
So if there's no, so you would write over whatever you had, it wouldn't match. If you had anything in there, you would just get duplication?
Okay.
So if you were entering your record again and you started your ID at number 2, so you didn't write over at the beginning, then you could actually have it duplicated.
Yeah. So, but yeah, data duplication is another issue with data imports and data migrations. If you want, I mean, deduplication is not a trivial topic, but I think I'm pretty sure there are options with the import process to detect duplicates, and yeah, you might want to write your own duplication code anyways. Yeah, but so like we have actually that problem right now in the real world database where people cannot see other people at certain points, but like if I add a new contact, it should still notify me if that person already exists. So yeah, I mean, it's basically not a non-trivial topic, and by default it is not covered in the import process. But I'm sure they have some things to check that. I mean, if you just match on first and last name, you will get wrong positives, false positives, because yeah, even I think on dates, on birth dates, it does not work very well. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the now.
Okay. So now we got our Excel file imported, and we can filter on the different phases. We can search by name. I think we can. Can search like that. We can also, there's now just one action, is to delete the record, but we can also add our custom actions very easily by defining a function and to do something with some of these records. And I see it's, I think, time for me to finish. Is that right? Okay, so we just went through. So there would have been like one or two other things I could show you, but I think it's a lot already. So.
If you want to stay, dinner won't be till 6 tonight, so you have an hour. You can go rest or work or walk by the beach or do whatever you want, or stay here and let Samuel show you the last 2 things you didn't get to.
I think I will not show them, but if you like have questions, then feel free to come afterwards to me or yeah. Okay, thank you very much.